All right. So welcome everybody to our monthly webinar, first Friday webinar. So we've got a few people on here, Avi Cantor, let's say, uh, we've got Bob Clark, Jay Patterson. Uh, as always, Devin Harper is our producer on this. So uh, today I just want to be brief and talk about the experience that Bob Clark and I had this past week in Boston. We had a chance to make a presentation that Bob, I'll let you talk a little bit about it, but I thought it went very well. And the nature of the talk, I think, was gave at least me and I'm sure you, Bob, some insights into how we might present our work to certain audiences, specifically those who are thinking about what comes next in their lives. They've been successful in their lives. They've made money, and they're looking to have more significance, more impact, and leave a more of a legacy. And I think that the conversation that we're going to go through will hopefully give you some ideas about how we might talk about uh, uh, empowered wealth in the context of where these people are in their lives. So with that, Devin, would you mind putting up the outline? So this talk, while Devin's doing that, this talk was for the Essex County Estate Planning Council. So Bob is a member of the council, and he was kind enough to secure the invitation to speak there. And again, he and I both spoke on Wednesday. So the title of the talk was "To Live, Not Just Leave a Legacy." And what, as you might imagine, what we did was basically talk about empowered wealth. And we shared the two stories that we would typically share in any kind of uh, say extended conversation. We shared the story of the gratitude rock in an abbreviated form, and we shared the woman on the airplane story in an abbreviated form. So I'm going to pause there and just say that one of the things that Bob and I decided to do was to minimize eliminate some of the details, excuse me, but eliminate some of the details that would ordinarily include in that conversation because we had a time constraint for this meeting. It's a breakfast meeting. People are busy. So having to cover both stories in the typical way that we would do so would have taken up the entire time without making some of our other key points. So I say that I preface my remarks with that by way of saying that uh, the story of the gratitude rock eliminated everything about the gratitude rock. We went just basically to the model of gratitude. And so I'm going to pause there. Bob, can you hear me? Are you on?
I am, yes.
Okay. You might describe how that unfolded and maybe lend your perspective to how that went and what you might have observed having been in the audience and seen how we eliminated most of the detail from the story and went cut right to the model.
Yeah, we had about 15 to 18 people in the room, so it wasn't a very large crowd, and we used a flip chart. And I think that Ron only had 2 pages of the flip chart that he used, the quadrant, and then also gratitude, a little bit of potent on there too with the gratitude. So it was really just that Lee's daughter had a problem with substance abuse and everybody was feeling embarrassed about it. And I think Ron actually asked the audience how they might feel. And we didn't actually get into the rock. We just got into that, led Lee to be grateful and to discover gratitude and how that informed a lot of the work of empowered wealth. From there, we pretty much moved to the quadrant, or actually we went through potent at that point. And then we moved into the quadrant in more of a Q&A way of going through it. So we did get to the airplane, and I believe, Ron, you started with when you think about money, what do you think of? Or think about wealth, what do you think of?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
really just use that question to get through the entire quadrant. And by doing it that way, they filled in most of the quadrant for us. And Ron provided a little more articulation at the end. I think this whole presentation was perhaps 25 minutes or so, maybe, no longer than that. And at the end, we had time, and we had a lot of questions and answers, especially for a small crowd. And I would describe the response from the crowd as enthusiastic. So that was very, very interesting. They were very, very involved. And instead of being one or two people that said, yeah, that was really good, it was very enthusiastic response. They asked for slides about this, which I offered up and sent out to people today. There's a lawyer who wants to meet and talk more about how to use this in their practice. It was very, very interesting, the response. And I think maybe having a 25-minute presentation is pretty good versus a longer one, and leaving more time for Q&A. So what would you say, Ron?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say, excuse me, and Avi, I'm going to ask you to comment a little bit about this, but it's embedded in this is something that Avi has shared with me and several others about structuring presentations. Embedded in this was just a discussion about how the world is changing, and we talked a little bit about how, especially in light of the most recent tax law in the U.S., how a lot of people in the audience were facing an uncertain future, where they had previously based their businesses on essentially scaring their clients into, worrying about whether or not they owed a lot of taxes, and shifting the conversation to more of a conversation about, well, what else could we be talking about? And again, the whole notion was, you live your legacy, you don't just leave a legacy, and that's from I would say a pithy phrase I first heard from someone else, but Lee's picked it up and talks about it relatively frequently. So Avi, if you wouldn't mind just sharing just kind of the 5 kind of main points that are in that guideline that you use for making presentations, I think that'd be helpful.
Sure. And I'm going to ask you to nudge me a little further along. Candidly, we've got so many good things going on. It's escaping me which of the outlines or guidelines specifically.
Oh, okay. Well, just the world is changing. There's going to be winners and losers.
Got it. Narrative, right?
Yeah.
All right. I was a few months back, almost a year ago now, actually, someone had shared with me it was a blog post, and the blog post was about a sales presentation, a sales narrative that they had recently seen that they really thought was a compelling way to share an idea or to sell a service, etc. And what Ron is alluding to is that the basic outline of the presentation had 5 components to it. First of all, they named the change. So there's a change out there. And depending on the industry or the topic, the world is always changing. We live in a VUCA world. And so the very important is to identify what the change is, something people can identify with.
Yeah. So in this situation, what we're saying is that the change is that people want to do more than just leave a legacy. They they have an opportunity to live a legacy. So that's maybe step one. So
Yeah.
please continue.
Yeah. And so they, along with that, they're identifying that there are winners and losers. So as a result of the change, there's going to be folks or entities or it really could be at any scale or level, whether it's individual or business or community, that are going to fall behind and are going to struggle and ultimately fail. And then there are probably going to be, or there are going to be winners. There's going to be individuals who are able to thrive and to leverage the change and to use that as an opportunity to succeed, if you will, to ride the wave or the wave of change. So that's really the first two pieces of the 5 steps. The third is to outline or tease is a better way, what we call the promised land. So a better way to put it maybe is to tease the outcome. So what is possible for this individual or for this community or for this business? And it's not about our services. It's not about our process. It's not about the shiny things. It's really about what would be their state. You know, what would they look like, feel like, be able to do, their capabilities? What would be the outcome for them in being able to achieve, to thrive and to achieve the changes?
So Avi, in that context, in this presentation that we did on Wednesday, what we talked about was optimizing true wealth. That if people were to really be winners in this, that advisors would be helping their clients optimize their true wealth. And so that was teasing the promised land in that one.
Sure. And Ron, I would take it even a step further. What is the evidence of having optimized true wealth? You know, what are the outcomes?
Yeah.
You know, to
that's
me,
true.
That's the sort of promised land, is their specific outcomes as associated with true wealth optimization.
Yeah, and to that point, I think, and Bob, you can back me up on this. I think because we had developed this model of true wealth using their answers, I think it was fairly clear that there was wide variance as to what true wealth meant to each one of them. But I think they got a chance to express what true wealth, might mean. In other words, kind of tease the promised land themselves, actually.
And I think they, by having multiple people in the room, maybe with different ideas on what that was, they were able to feed off of each other and sort of get ideas from each other. That might not be consistent with building your own thoughts, but it was helpful for everybody to have some input from other people.
I agree. All right. Avi, please continue.
So the fourth of the 5 steps is to then introduce what they refer to as magic gifts for overcoming the obstacles to getting there. So if we've now shared or socialized or have them imagining what the outcomes of optimizing true wealth are, now we're introducing our features. You might think of it as our methodologies, our tools, our ideas as magic, again, this is in quotes here in the presentation I saw, as magic gifts for overcoming obstacles to getting there. This was a movie, this was a sorcerer movie. These would be all the magic tools, that the group of merry individuals would have to help them along their journey, if you will, getting where they were going.
Yeah. Devin, could I ask you to put up the outline again, please? Because I want to comment on Avi's remarks here. I think that here our magic gifts are in number 7. So our presentation was largely about why we do what we do and what we do, and we hinted at the how without explaining it in much detail. So, and this is a little contrary to our acronym, but we said, well, you begin with gratitude. And I'll just say parenthetically, instead of saying go big and begin in gratitude, I chose to go with begin with gratitude, simply because with a crowd that they weren't familiar with our work at all, so I just felt like it would be more easily understood by stating it that way. But anyway, gratitude is a big part of it. Be intentional about wealth and well-being, and you'll note there that we have shifted from true wealth, which is our term, to wealth and well-being, which is a more practical understanding of what it is. And those words are chosen intentionally just because of the work that Avi and Eric Gabrielson are doing now in the Twin Cities, Jackson, Wyoming, and in Philadelphia. They're already actively using that specific terminology. And then the next point, model the way. This comes from a leadership model that Glenn Snyder's going to be sharing at the symposium, but it's the 5 elements of exemplary leadership. So model the way is one, and certainly the one that we've advocated so far in our work with our path to mastery, but is one of 5. So, and Glenn's going to spend some more time on that in Chicago when we meet in a couple of weeks to unpack that. And again, even then, we're still hinting at our magic gifts without actually going into much detail about it. And then finally, the last one was cultivate collaboration. And I'll add to that, which is not on the outline, cultivating both collaboration and family culture. Certainly, we've advocated family culture as kind of the missing element in estate planning, but also certainly collaboration, which is still aspirational for us. But I think we've unpacked that enough to know that I think we're on the right path. So anyway, that's to Avi's point about the 4th element in these presentations is kind of hinting at or revealing some of our magic gifts. So I'm going to throw it back to you just to wrap up your summary of this 5-step model that you've been using.
I can. I just want to offer anecdotally, really the distinction here between 3 and 4, which is talking about the outcomes, what's possible, and juxtaposing that on the stuff along the way that is used to get there, is very important. I think it's very easy for us to fall into, I wouldn't call it a trap, but to spend time talking about our stuff, all our shiny objects and ideas and concepts, and at the cost of not focusing enough on the outcomes of using our stuff. And for those of you who've heard me share in the past, it's not meant to be boastful of my family, but I spend a lot of time just talking about the outcomes we've had, just to offer anecdotal evidence of what's possible using the tools. So getting others to imagine what's possible, what the outcomes could be for them and their families over generations, I think is a very important part of our narrative. And then backing that up by sharing some of the unique objects or unique things that we have to offer along the way. And then finally, number 5, Ron, is to present some evidence that if they go with us, if you will, or follow our lead or use our mindset, that they'll get there themselves, that they'll get to their own outcomes, their own promised land, and then show them perhaps some anecdotal evidence, whether it's through an everyman story or real stories, disguising, the characters as appropriate, that we have experience and demonstrate to them the benefits of of having gone down this path.
Yeah, and I've had the benefit of several recent experiences where these elements have proven to be true and to be useful and to be distinguishing elements, really, in terms of people's experiences. The most recent one with Eric Gabrielson in the Twin Cities. So anyway, that is in a nutshell the presentation, and the presentation itself, as Bob suggests, is a short one, but it begins with kind of the clever notion of you live your legacy, you don't just leave it, and that there is a path to go ahead to doing that. It involves empowered wealth. It involves our teaching, training, and coaching programs. It involves working with a skilled facilitator. But I think that we've put enough time and effort into thinking this through, putting the capabilities together, that I think we can legitimately offer something that is unique, different, and is meaningfully different in the sense that we can have every expectation we're going to produce the kinds of results that people are looking for. So I'm going to pause there. Bob, any further comments?
No, I think that was it, and I do think one of the things, I guess one comment more, along with the point that you kind of tease about the tools. Most of the questions we had afterwards were how you do this, and I think that was good to leave it out there a little bit to tease the tools, because we had a limited time period for one, but that left the door open for questions and further conversation. Yeah. So I think that was valuable.
Good. Let me follow that up, Bob, by asking you, where do you see yourself going from here? How do you see yourself, say, parlaying this experience and using it to develop more opportunities and apply some of these ideas in your practice?
Yeah, there were two things we kind of discussed. One was our lunch following the meeting with events, and we talked about a golf event. And, using this line of thought, and I think, Avi, you might be working on a golf event, or is it? No, it's in Wisconsin, right? It's not with Avi. But yeah,
that's with Chris Doty. Chris
Doty. Yeah, so that is one way. And the second way is just getting out there and speaking with more accountants, more attorneys, more centers of influence who we can use this presentation for in a short meeting to build some interest and lead to further meetings. So I think trying to get around those centers of influence, the people that are part of the teams of wealthy individuals, wealthy families.
And you in fact did demonstrate that at lunch, a couple of hours after the meeting, in Boston there with Rick. So
right,
that's to your credit.
Right, and that's Rick suggested I talk to another guy we both know who sold a company for well in the 9 figures, and kind of bounce these ideas off of him, and the feedback will be interesting from somebody that generally associates with billionaires, and whether they see this as a shameless sales pitch or a substantive effort. So I think that'll be beneficial.
I like our chances. Okay.
Me too.
So anybody else? Jay, any comments, thoughts? Avi, any further comments, thoughts?
Oh, I'm just happy you're sharing the experience. I think it's worthwhile. This is not an uncommon experience.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else?
I like the 20-minute option because it just opens up a whole world. There is a lot of people that aren't willing to commit to a day, but most everybody's got 20 minutes.
Yeah, there you go. So welcome, Jeff. I don't know when you dropped in, but welcome.
Yeah, I got in late, sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, you missed a stellar introduction. I just have to say that. So anyway, okay. So just if there are no other thoughts or comments about this, I'm just going to wrap up and just say, hey, I'm going to see most of you in Chicago here, and in short order. We got the symposium coming up. I think a bunch of you are coming in for ACT as well. So I think this promises to be a really great event. We've got some great speakers, including Avi Cantor, who will be speaking with Eric Gabrielson, sharing this concept of the wealth and well-being communities. And I think, I have to hand it to you guys for launching into it and also making the progress that you've made so far. Bob, I know you'll be there, and I'm sure that people will be, anybody who sees this video will be interested in following up to see how things have unfolded for you in this. And you've actually turned the outline into a PowerPoint that you're using for your own use. So I'm sure people might be interested in that as well. So, so any last thoughts, comments, anything that people are want to talk about here?
I'm really interested in talking with Avi about the community development. We've got 2 communities we're working on here in Canada, and experience is always the best teacher. So I'd appreciate having a conversation with Avi and Eric about that.
You going to be in Chicago?
I'm going to be in Chicago.
Okay. Well, then duly noted. I think you guys will just figure out a time to, we've got plenty of break times. There's time between the meeting and dinner, and most everybody's staying over until the next morning as well. So there should be plenty of opportunities that's been built into our schedule. So hopefully everybody will have time to talk. So thanks, Jay.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Okay. Yep. All right. With that,
as long as Avi and Eric are willing.
Always willing.
Yeah, there's nothing like a glass of wine or a beer to convince them that they should spend some time.
I will say, on the heels of your remark, Jay, our ambition is to continue to evolve in a way that's homogeneous enough where we're creating a universal process for what we're doing that is applicable and accretive to all of our community. So we don't intend to do any of this in a vacuum, and the more we can do this in the open form of our community, really the test of our success will be how widely adaptable this is as a template, if you will, as a universal process, as a way of doing things. So yeah, the more conversations, the better from my perspective.
Yeah, and I will certainly acknowledge you, Avi and Eric, who's not on the call, but just for your high intentions and your from inception, your desire to create not only the communities for yourselves in your own geographic areas, but also to share your experiences, good and bad, and your know-how and kind of the principles that evolve from it with everybody. And that was consciously expressed from the beginning. So I want to acknowledge you for stepping up and doing that. I'm sure everybody's going to benefit from that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up. Thanks very much to Bob and Avi for sharing, Jay for your comments, Jeff for your comments, and until Chicago, I will see you guys there. Okay.
Keep your lines tight.
Enjoy the fishing and the beer.
Not necessarily in that order. So we'll. All right, over and out here. That's a wrap, guys. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
All right.